A lot of outernet time has actually passed since the other videos, so I'm pretty hyper and nervous. As you can see, I've shaved my head off again, so we get to see in these ethics videos if this actually grows back or what to do with this. So try to find creative ways to make fun of me. Hooray. Hopefully this new microphone and camera are working well. All right, so let's start. So this Rachel's article, The Challenge of Cultural Relativism, is one that you probably don't need a video for, but I think I found a nice way to organize it in case you didn't kind of catch the overall thesis he was trying to bring out. Good? So let's go to my screen. Let me show you this little document I created, and let's try to break down this article to make it really clear. Again, you might not need this, but I think it could be helpful. Now, some of the things I'm going to say about this Rachel's article will only make sense if you have fresh in your mind that little 10-minute segment of the claims video where I talk about relativism. So make sure that's fresh in your mind, because that's how I'm going to organize this Rachel's piece. Okay, so first, the overall thesis of this whole article is banking on that distinction I made in that video about why people are confused about relativism. Please know that I think people who stress this relativism are very well intentioned. They are concerned about people being really dogmatic and authoritarian in their values. They're worried about racism and jingoism and all that stuff. And so they're well intentioned, but they've gone too far in their intentions, and it's going to lead to just as bad of problems down the road with our inability to even talk about morality. So the basic idea of the Rachel's article is to point out this distinction between saying, yes, we can see some value differences between cultures, but that leads to a problem of saying that there can be no moral claims whatsoever. We can't make moral judgments. And so this is the distinction in that video I made between descriptive ethics and normative ethics. So just to briefly review that idea, it is one thing to describe ethical beliefs, but it's a very different thing to say what should or should be done about those beliefs. So if we find that, say, someone has a different belief than ours, it is a very different thing to just say it's different, to then say all values are equal, we should be tolerant of all cultural values. Those are making normative claims about what we should or shouldn't do. Okay. So I found this little trick to clarify what Rachel's is doing by looking at what he does. Look at on page 2. On page 2 of the article, he has these 6 bullet points. And I think it's nice to reorganize this article around these 6 points. So let's start with this first point he makes, point number 1. Claim number 1 is this claim that different societies have different moral codes. Now, this is technically the starting point of where most relatives begin. They look at differences and then say, oh no, we can't make any judgments. We have to tolerate everything. Well, let's start with this one, because even this very first basic sociological claim or anthropological claim is a little overstated itself. Okay, so first, basic claim. Different societies have different moral codes. Well, on page 5, Rachel's will say, but yes, but that is not as deep as it looks. Yes, they have different value beliefs, but those are more about the beliefs and context than they are about the actual core values. It is actually just the contextual background and the beliefs that are different. Our core values are very similar. So look at his example of eating cows. He would say, if we go somewhere like most of India, and we would say, okay, cows are a food source in Western cultures, and so these people are very different for not eating cows. They think eating cows is wrong, where we think it's fine. I actually don't think it's fine, but for different reasons. So we would look at that and say, the belief that it's wrong or right to eat cows is vastly different. No, but if we trace the beliefs in background, we would see that the core value is the same. For example, if you were really hungry, would you eat your grandparents? No, of course you wouldn't, right? You would say that that's terrible. We aren't cannibals. But if you look at the background beliefs in a society like in much of India, you would say there is a possibility due to reincarnation that eating a cow is actually eating the soul of your grandparents, And none of us would do that. So that same underlying value is there. It's just the context and belief that's different. And we would find that in a lot of these values that we think are insane, we would say. I mean, for instance, a lot of us in the United States, for example, would look at terrorists and say, how dare you kill civilians for political purposes? Well, what do we think most modern wars are doing? Most modern wars are the killing of civilians for political and actually economic purposes, and that value shouldn't be that different. We should look and judge our own wars in the same way we judge terrorism. All right, fine. So go to claim number 2. So claim number 2 says, therefore, because there are these differences, there is no objective standard that can be used to judge one societal code over another. Well, here again, this is a problem. First, there is a jump going from facts to values. So look at what Rachel's will do on page 3. No, just because people disagree does not mean there is no objective standards. A couple examples. He says, look at people who might believe in a flat earth. Just because they believe that doesn't mean there is no truth to the matter. They might believe that there is a flat earth, but they're wrong. I am so sorry. And we could point to the data and show them the information to show that they're wrong. Doesn't mean they'll believe it. But notice, just because there are these disagreements doesn't mean there's no way to adjudicate these disagreements. Or, because I'm always corny, think of a bunch of little kids talking about where babies come from. Now, one little kid says it comes from a stork. Another little kid has some myth their parents told them about its magic, or I don't know what they believe. Now notice, just because there are these disagreements doesn't mean that we have no truth of the matter. We can figure out where babies actually come from. Now, of course, if you're a bunch of little kids, and by the way, I think most of us are not too much better when it comes to this kind of scientific knowledge, including myself, we would say they could work and debate and come to nothing. But that doesn't mean there's no truth of the matter of where babies actually come from. We don't give up just because there are a lot of disagreements. And again, let me stress the point, I think a lot of our information is very limited, but that doesn't mean we give up on there being actually objective standards or a truth of the matter. And I would actually go one step further than Rachel's does. In the video, I showed you different ways that we can judge values rationally. Without being ethnocentric or jingoistic, we can judge moral standards by their rational consistency. So we can say that, yes, some societal moral codes are better than others. If a societal code says raping people is fine, no, that's rationally inconsistent. So there is room for these kinds of judgments just on the basis of rational consistency. Not judging their culture by my culture, but by judging a culture based on its own rational consistencies. All right. Claim number 3. Again, he is saying, because we see these moral differences, these claims 2 through 6 do not follow. Claim number 3. The moral code of our own society has no special status. It is merely one among many. Again, that does not follow logically. But here, Rachel's makes a nice point. He's saying, no, that doesn't follow, but there are some things to learn from this. Most importantly, we need to learn that we need to be humble in our own moral assumptions. Our society might have terrible moral values, and we're using those to judge others. So we need to be more open-minded about learning about our own assumptions and improving our own values. All right. Claim number 4, that the relativists think follows but doesn't. There is no universal truth in ethics. That is, there are no moral truths that hold for all people at all times. Again, this is a wrong assumption to make. There are some moral rules, Rachel's will say, that are necessary for society to exist. What are the obvious ones he brings up? Caring for children, being truthful, prohibiting murder. I like what Chomsky says. He says that the burden of proof is on the person who recommends killing. Whether you're talking about war or the need for health care or gun control or anything, the person that says we shouldn't kill people wins the argument unless the other person can deal with the burden of proof to show that this particular circumstance is an allowable killing. The prohibition against murder and killing is a pretty standard universal one that doesn't bear any burden of proof. Claim number 5. Again, misunderstanding of relativism. The moral code of a society determines what is right within that society. That is, if the moral code of a society says that a certain action is right, then that action is right, at least within that society. Oh God, no. No, right? This is insane, Rachel's. We all can think of ways that our society's moral values can be improved. And in my claims video, I go and I say that if we look at our moral heroes, whether we're talking MLK Jr., Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Abraham Lincoln, Jesus, what made them great is their ability to judge moral codes, especially the ones in their own society. We don't look at a culture and say, oh, whatever that culture says is right is right. No, we need to be able to critique cultures, especially our own. This is what morality, being good at this moral evaluation, demands. I absolutely assume that all of you can think of ways that our society has major value problems, putting profits over people, our warfare agenda and foreign policy. I mean, come on, right? There are absolutely things that you think our society should improve. Another mistake. Finally, number 6. The relativist assumes it is mere arrogance for us to try to judge the conduct of other people. We should adopt an attitude of tolerance toward the practices of other cultures. Now, in my claims video, Rachel's doesn't really address this one, but he does say, again, there are some lessons to be learned here. But yes, we should be tolerant of most, underline most cultural practices. But telling people they should be tolerant is intolerant and contradicts moral relativism. To say what we should do about morality, even to recommend relativism, is a contradiction to relativism. We should not be tolerant of all cultural values. Most cultural values, we have a lot we can learn from other cultures, but that doesn't mean we need to tolerate murder, right? Terrorism, our own included, rape. No, there are absolutely places where we need to have good critiques of cultural values. Good. I hope that was helpful.